Great, perfect. Okay, so thank you so much, Christine. So, as she said, I'm going to present some of the dynamics of the Countryside Stewardship Facilitation Fund, which is one of the only sort of collective approaches currently evident in England. So I'll just begin by offering a little bit of an overview of the main policy setting for the Facilitation Fund. So the Facilitation Fund is part of England's current Countryside Stewardship Scheme, and this is the main rural development programme in England, which has delivered Pillar 2 of the Common Agricultural Policy since 2015. I know that's all about to change. And the main elements of the scheme are higher tier and mid-tier, which includes certain wildlife offers and capital grants. So these higher tier and mid tier are sort of different almost intensities of level of environmental delivery. And within the elements of these schemes, farmers can choose from a range of options covering multi-year agreements, capital items, or a mix of both. And most of the elements of this scheme are competitive. So this means if you apply for countryside stewardship, depending on the route you choose, your application will probably be scored against other applications. And this is because applications are assessed to determine which ones kind of offer the best value for the environment and for value for money. As you can see here, facilitation funds sort of sits almost to the side of this, so it is a dedicated part of the countryside stewardship scheme, but it's not integrated necessarily into the sort of main framework of the countryside stewardship scheme itself. So countryside stewardship pays for a facilitator to run and support and bring together a group of individual farmers, foresters and other land managers. Groups can consist of farmers who are in any or in no agri-environment schemes. They don't have to be already in a countryside stewardship agreement. And the aim is that farmers will work cooperatively at the landscape scale in order to maximise the impact of the overall countryside stewardship scheme and improve the impact of that scheme on the environment through bringing larger areas of land under active management. So it aims to improve the natural environment at the landscape rather than the single farm scale, achieve greater improvements than individual holdings could on their own, and maximise the impact of countryside stewardship. The facilitator of the group is central to the group's success. Facilitators can come from a broad variety of backgrounds, from national park authorities, private consultants or NGOs such as the river trusts. And the roles as facilitators can be broadly grouped as internal and external roles. So the role internal to the group is focused on the development of cooperation between group members, interpreting the countryside stewardship priorities for the group, providing guidance to group members when they need to submit individual but supporting countryside stewardship applications, so helping them with their other countryside stewardship applications for things like land management and capital items, and agreeing the different countryside stewardship priorities that group members will take forward both on their own holdings as well. And they also endorse countryside stewardship applications made by the individuals within their facilitation fund group, because as we discussed earlier, it's a competitive scheme. Externally to the group, they might bring in other experts on areas that they're not qualified to sort of provide advice on, so bringing external experts to the group. They also suggest and make and keep links with other local partnerships and initiatives, as well as DEFRA, to make sure the group is carrying out work that complements the local actions that other groups are undertaking. They provide information to Natural England and the Rural Payments Agency as well to show that what the work the group is doing and how it's kind of joined up working and how it's supposed to make a difference to the delivery of the Countryside Stewardship Scheme's main priorities. So here I've just outlined a brief timeline for the development of the Facilitation Fund scheme as a part of Countryside Stewardship. So when Countryside Stewardship first launched in 2015, there were 19 Facilitation Fund groups sort of tentatively funded for 5 years at that time. They then expanded for another 30 groups in 2016, again with the agreement length of 5 years. In 2017, there was a regional call for Northern Natural Flood Management groups and 12 groups funded under this, and we'll discuss that more shortly. And the fourth round, also later in 2017, went back to a national round. And this is when they started sticking with the 3-year agreements as opposed to the 5-year agreements. And there have been 2 subsequent rounds advertised and funded since then, but there's less information on the exact numbers and locations of those groups so far. Back in 2020, DEFRA and Natural England also published their first report on the benefits that Countryside Stewardship Facilitation Fund provides and how it relates to natural capital and social indicators. So I'll just touch briefly as a sort of case study on the Northern Natural Flood Management groups. So in the winter of 2015 and 2016, some really severe storms caused quite catastrophic levels of flood damage in Northern England. And so Northern England, and so Natural England ran an additional round of facilitation fund focused specifically on bringing farmers and land managers together to provide these catchment scale solutions to flood hit regions, communities in the region. 12 groups were funded in this area on a 3-year basis. And the funding sort of formed part of a large suite of new initiatives to address natural flood management in 2017, when DEFRA announced £15 million of funding for 34 community and 24 landscape scale natural flood management projects as well. So there's several, CSFF is one of several sort of instruments being utilised to address this specific issue here. And speaking to some of these groups, which sit roughly across our Sill region, form the basis of our SWOT analysis, which was used in the first half of today's session. I can see I'm speeding towards my sort of time limit, but I just want to briefly outline here sort of the social successes of the Countryside Stewardship Facilitation Fund. So it really combines some of the best elements of formal and informal social dimensions. And the facilitator provides a real sort of structure for the groups. The provision of specialist speakers and training provides opportunities and enables the development of key skills for information sharing, broadening knowledge, exchange and expertise among the farmers within a group, which can then obviously be expanded out or disseminated. There are some real weaknesses, mainly based on the sort of restrictive rules of the scheme. So if as only group activities are allowed within the scheme, that meant that some of the natural flood management measures couldn't be applied to individual holdings. And so there were also limited opportunities for dialogue across facilitation fund groups in these more specialist areas, and for group members to promote activities or successes, or for facilitators to share experience of good practice. There's not sort of an infrastructure for facilitators to speak to other facilitators as yet. Speed through some of these a little bit, but I'm very happy to provide more information. The other thing I'd just like to talk about is the opportunities provided. So there's a good deal of enthusiasm within facilitation fund groups to continue, but as we know, they currently only last for 5 or now 3 years. There's also potential for some of these groups to explore other countryside stewardship funding options and really utilise wider networks to enable groups to continue developing projects or access further funding pots from local environmental organisations. This expansion of dialogue between groups would also really enhance the motivational support system, open to both group members and facilitators, and provide capacity for further commitment and maybe even friendly competition. In working with other local networks external to the Facilitation Fund, there's also an opportunity to take advantage of the intersections in skills and benefits between collaborative and other approaches, such as the payments by results approaches, which in Wensleydale area there was a natural flood management group and a payments by results pilot study. The development of wider facilitator networks would really enhance the overall effectiveness of the scheme, we think. I realise I'm running out of time, so I just want to come really quickly because there's some real issues with the development of the scheme. But the way that it's currently being presented by DEFRA and Natural England is as a very sort of positive approach. So the main headlines which came out of the Phase 3 report on Natural and the Facilitation Fund offered a very positive outlook. However, as this quote here highlights, the main means through which farmers contribute to natural capital is through their own individual countryside stewardship agreements rather than their involvement in the Facilitation Fund. The key benefits that are garnered from the Facilitation Fund are social, relating to the development of social capital and the capacity for knowledge transfer, both between members and from members to their local communities. In terms of land management, the Facilitation Fund remains more of a cherry on top or an added bonus, which doesn't necessarily in its current form have direct and causal impacts on England's land management. It's not integrated sufficiently into the tiers, levels, or layers of the mainstream schemes which farmers rely on both for their funding and turn to aid their delivery of environmental public goods. So I've got a picture of a trifle here, because at the moment I think we've sort of come to the conclusion that Facilitation Fund it's a nice added extra, but it's not yet sufficiently an integral layer, part of the meat of the conventional agri-environment schemes. But there are opportunities here. So in English agri-environment policy, we talk a lot about the different levels and tiers of schemes, as I've said, but ELMS, our new environmental land management scheme, which is obviously coming in to replace the Common Agricultural Policy in England. Farmers will really probably need to build up a suite of agreements across the 3 levels identified here. So the sustainable farming incentive is the kind of base layer of the new ELM scheme, and then we have these ideas of local nature recovery and landscape recovery. And to embed coordinated approaches into the agri-environmental land management, layering initiatives like Facilitation Fund better into the mainstream approaches, there's a lot of potential for landscape scale delivery. Hopefully through the development of ELMS, the Facilitation Fund can move from sort of a garnish or an accompaniment to the mainstream schemes into an integral element of their success through the coordinated delivery of public goods for public money. And I do have a list of sources which I'm very happy to provide more details if anyone's interested.